All right. Well, welcome everyone to another edition of One Plus One, your place for inconvenient truth telling and myth busting. And we are rejoined by my friend Boyan Stanislavski, the founder and editor in chief of the Barricade, which is an independent pan Eastern European news outlet that offers a critical left wing perspective on Eastern European and international affairs. It's published in English, Bulgarian, Romanian, and Polish, I believe, right, Boyan, or not?
Well, no, I do publish in Polish, but we are not publishing the platforms that where Polish translations appear. I mean, they belong to other entities. But yeah, I mean, our authors are being translated. We do translate their texts, and I occasionally publish in Polish as well.
Perfect. And Boyan is a longtime journalist and an activist and organizer from Bulgaria and Poland. He's our left-wing intellectual and our ambassador to truthdom on all things Eastern Europe. And we're going to be talking about, is Bosnia-Herzegovina going to break up? Will Ukraine see two of its eastern parts divorcing it like Crimea? Maybe we'll talk about Poland and Belarus. We are going to talk about the ongoing coronavirus crisis. So Boyan, thank you for coming back on the program. It's an honor to have you back.
Thank you. It's always an honor and pleasure to be on One Plus One.
Likewise. And so my first question, Boyan, is I know you cover mostly Eastern European affairs, but the second time I had you back on the program, you touched on German affairs and Germany propping up the former leader of your country, Boyko Borisov. And Germany plays an imperial role in much of the region of Eastern Europe. So, can you talk to us about the end of the reign of Angela Merkel? What do you think is often her overlooked negative legacy? And what do you expect from our new German underboss and technocrats that are replacing her in Berlin? And if you want, the real role of Germany in the world.
Germany is the third or fourth largest economy in the world, so definitely it does project its power onto other European states, and is of course trying to interfere all over the world, probably wherever it's possible. Although the possibilities, so to say, of German imperialism, if you like, were limited in the recent 2 decades, maybe, or maybe a little less than that, to the area of the European Union. And this is because the European Union, I don't know how much the Canadian viewers of yours or the American viewers know about the European Union, but this is a very complicated organism to manage. Because on the one hand, it's those are sovereign states, which have their own governments, have their own constitutions, and most of all have their own taxation systems. And at the same time, there was this attempt to create some kind of economic unity and to be able to form a kind of bloc that could have its own policy and that could assert itself in international politics. And it does sound convincing, of course, because in Europe, which is very diverse and a small territory, we've got a lot of states, a lot of cultures, many different, many borders and kind of regions even, okay, that are cross border, but they have also their own identity and so on and so forth. And at the same time, when you look at the map, then you can see the Eurasian continent, and Europe just appears to be like a peninsula, like a Western peninsula of that. And at the same time, it's so complicated and diverse in as I said, in political way, in cultural way, in all kinds of ways. So to create such an organism was from the very beginning a very difficult endeavor, and it's not working very well, because the societies in Europe, they probably would have agreed and would have followed, the kind of path to unification, maybe federalization or something like that. But then, the European Union would have to give them something substantial. And of course, there are some substantial gains, but I would argue that we're speaking here of decorum rather than anything really, that affects your everyday life. Like, okay, that's great. I can travel to Germany or to Belgium without showing my passport anywhere. It's great that, the airlines are cheaper. It's great that there are some other, like, I don't know, I don't have to pay for roaming connections when I use my cell phone when I'm somewhere abroad in Europe. Those are great things, but they are, as I said, this is just the decorum. I mean, I would prefer that some substantial things have been changed over this period of the last 2 decades or so, than, to have those gains and not have those gains. All right. That's like, I like to compare this to the Polish railway network system. In Poland, in 1999, we had 30,000 kilometers passenger railway. Okay, like put together all the passenger railway connections, they amounted to 30,000 kilometers. Now we've got like less than 15,000, but all the trains are new and they have like, Wi-Fi and stuff like that. Well, I would have preferred to have more trains that don't run 200 kilometers per hour, but 160 kilometers per hour, that there's more of them and that people use them and that they're affordable price rather than to have Wi-Fi everywhere, okay? But then have half of the network cut. So this is pretty much the European Union, okay? And of course, with all, I mean, I realize that it's very I'm simplifying here, but I'm doing that for the purpose of the discussion. So this kind of arrangement is not something that people will necessarily support. So because it's difficult to find support on that basis, then they had to create this ideological concept that will kind of be the part of the European identity, the kind of that will make people justify their support for for the European Union. And I mean, of course, there were some people that that of course thought and were thinking rationally, have been thinking rationally, that it makes sense to belong to some kind of group of countries in order to secure your whatever, like your existence in the world, even if you like, right? Because how is the Polish economy, for example, or the Bulgarian economy for that matter, but not only, even the Belgian economy, if you like, you're based in Belgium, how is the Belgian economy going to effectively compete with the Japanese or Chinese or American economy? This is a nonsense. Right, so even from this capitalistic point of view, if you like, then it does make sense, and some people would be supporting the European Union or the participation of their country in the European Union, but most people wouldn't kind of do the analysis. So they had to be given something in order to somehow identify, to relate to it. All right, so they created this. Well, they didn't actually create it, but they kind of pumped up the liberal democratic ideology with all of its dogmas and particularly human rights and stuff like that, and they turned it into its caricature, really, in a sense that I mean, when you want to talk about human rights in European Union, why don't we talk about, for example, about the yellow vests in France, or why don't we talk about the situation in Bulgaria for the last 15 years, okay? Why don't we talk about that? No, we talk about human rights in Belarus, in Russia, in China, in Venezuela, in Cuba, in, all the countries that somehow are, are not the favorite ones of the, of the West, collective West, as the Russians like to refer to it. So, this is, but of course that plays a very important role, because it does allow, I mean, it does make many people think that, okay, that we live now, it might be, things might be problematic, but we live in the best of all worlds, because here we've got human rights, here everything is secured, everyone feels great, no one's rights are breached, and this is just paradise on earth, only we're poor and whatever, but yeah, otherwise, things are fantastic. And, it's just the West, the civilized world, and so on and so forth. And, many people fall for that. Now, again, we could speak for another half an hour. Why is that the case? But this is let's just, accept this, that this is so. And this ideological aspect of the European Union has been increasingly exploited. And I think that Angela Merkel probably had well, I don't know whether she decided herself that this is going to be the way things are going to develop in the European Union, but for sure she was one of the most important decision makers at whatever table. I don't know how many people were there. And I would say that from the point of view of the coherence of the European Union, that made no sense. This was a very bad choice, because the situation now is that the European Union has been in crisis for I don't know how long, like probably 20 years or something. You know, I mean, we're talking about not even a single moment of some kind of peace and silence, that, you know, things would just develop for a while in like European Union wide, because some countries were very stable. Like if you take Germany, okay, Germany under Angela Merkel, and even before that, I mean, it was decreasing. The standards were decreasing, okay, all the time, but very steadily and very slowly. So you know, it was boringly, I would say, boringly stable and steady downgrade. And by the way, I think it also makes sense to perhaps talk about it later, because there are sentiments regarding stability in every society, or in many societies. Yet when the Germans want stability and one chancellor for 15 years, that's okay. But if the Russians want stability with one president for 15 or 20 years, that's very bad, you imagine, right? So anyway, so Angela Merkel definitely had her hand in this. I don't believe that this construction was made, you know, without her, you know, approval, at least. Maybe to some extent it was even her idea. But I look, how far can you go with this? Like, you know, you can make a lot of, you can posture a lot, you can make a lot of bombastic statements about human rights or about some, I don't know, civic liberties and stuff like that. But this is it. Like, you know, I mean, at one point people are going to get bored with this, and then, you know, we had moments that where people actually tried to test it out. Okay, like for example, well, not the people, but the situation, so to say. I mean, the global political situation. I mean, put those kind of this kind of talk and this kind of posture to the test. And let's for example, recall 2015, 2016, the huge wave of refugees and migrants that were led from Turkey to go into into Western Europe. Look, today, in retrospect, despite the fact that I, of course, stand for receiving those people and so on and so forth, this was a disaster. This was a disaster. I mean, it was uncontrolled. It was completely mismanaged. It was, you know, it provoked a lot of tension, social tensions in all over the European Union, in all countries. It provoked internal disputes within the European Union between different governments. It was a complete mess. Okay, and of course it was a fantastic fuel for our political and class enemies, that is the right wing, right? So and then, you know, you had this kind of ideological pressure. You know, people also react to that because people don't like to be, regardless of whether they are, you know, well educated or not so well educated, they don't like to be looked down at. They don't like to be lectured. No one likes that. This is just human nature, if you like. Okay, but and this was really partially, of course, because there were economic reasons for that, but partially that was also what was responsible for Brexit. Okay, because, you know, people and you know, immigration was also, I mean, played a super important role here. By the way, on our channel, we've got a great interview made by Maria Chernat with the author Paul Ambery, who is, of course, you know, like, because he just said that, you know, mass immigration is a problem. Then, of course, now he was labeled red, brown, and stuff like this, and there's no evidence.
I have my issues with Paul Emerby, but we're
Yeah,
not
okay, well, but there's no evidence. There's no
you.
evidence that he's a right winger, in my opinion, at least. And anyway, what I'm trying to say is that in this interview, he brilliantly explained how, you know, people were increasingly fed up with this, because people would just defend not even their jobs; they would just defend their sense of place, you know, in the community where they live or where their family has lived for I don't know how many decades or generations. And then, you know, if they when they would when they would object to whatever the government is introducing, like all kinds of demographical transgressions, economic transgressions in their region, then they would be called exactly all kinds of names, right? That they are racist, that they are backward, that they are xenophobic, that they don't want to accept modernity, and so on and so forth. And, quite naturally, those people, when they are confronted with this kind of talk, hostile talk, they kind of, they look for what is in the vicinity, in their emotional and political and cognitive, if you like, vicinity, and they turn towards family, tradition, some towards church, and so on and so forth. And then then the left stands up and blames those people for actually turning to those things instead of turning, I don't know, to them or I don't know, somewhere else. So what I'm trying to say here is that this ideological pressure has had its negative effects, not only because the negative effects were not only wrong decisions, wrong political decisions, and wrong political management of certain processes, but this was also, a huge. There was a huge response from the societies, and this response was, as I said, there were political elements in it, but it was mostly emotional. I mean, people didn't want to be in this position, that there's a technocratic elite that knows everything and is fantastic, and waves those blue banners with yellow or golden stars on it, and speaks about European identity and their and human rights and all great things and so on and so forth. And at the same time, those people who actually are there, I mean, they are the European Union, right? Then their concept and understanding of reality is rejected completely and totally, right? And this was extremely problematic, and this is extremely problematic because it created it created a perfect storm for those parties that are now gaining traction or have been gaining traction for the last 5, maybe a little longer than that, 5 years, maybe 10 years. And the mainstream media like to call them the populist right, or some call them the far right. And of course that contributed to additional to kind of additional misunderstanding of certain political terms, because I do agree that most of those parties, or all of those parties, are on the right. I agree with this, but then calling everyone a far right or a proto-fascist or a fascist, it ends up in situations that are I would say rather uncomfortable and embarrassing. I remember one of my fellow journalists from Poland was invited, I think it was a year ago, 2 years ago, to comment on something in the Polish TV, and the host of the program told him that Marine Le Pen's party in France, it used to be the National Front, I can't remember what the name is now, they changed it. So that it's an extremist far right party, and she just continued with like 3 or 4 more adjectives along the lines of the ones that I just put forward. And and he said, look, if you want to call the Marine Le Pen's whatever National Front or whatever they call right now extremist far right, absolutely proto-fascist and so on party, now what are you going to call the Polish government? Like what it's just we really need to put things in a kind of context, okay? Like what, the Polish government is then Nazi? Like how are you going to refer to it if you just want to shuffle terms without the actual understanding of what it is all about? And now I think that overall this results in this mess that I like to call I like to refer to as the idealist counter-revolution, because nothing matters anymore in the European Union. It's like words, they had meaning once, but you can basically bend it the way you like. You can throw all kinds of labels, left, right, and center. You can offend people, but of course you have to be very careful, because there are minorities and there are activist groups which when they are offended, then they can really push back. But then they are people that you should offend if you want to have the certificate, if you want to be certified as as a decent European citizen. And that is, you should, for example, offend Russians. That makes a lot of sense, and that gives you a lot of European identity. So if you're Russophobic and if you feel that, basically Russians, Chinese, or I don't know, some other nations like from Central Asia, for example, are barbaric and I don't know, should be managed by Europe or by the West or something like that, then yeah, then that's it. So I would say that Angela Merkel was not an able leader, really. I mean, she wasn't able to manage all those things. It just, she was trying hard, but then when she wasn't able to manage the whole thing, then she was just pretending that she's this Hausfrau, from East Germany, that she, she cannot be held accountable to as a serious, seasoned politician and stuff like that. I would say that her legacy is the migration mess from 2015 2016. It's Brexit. It's ongoing conflicts. Okay, with many Eastern European governments. It's also the empowering of the forces that are really hostile to us. And regardless of whether we're going to call them extreme right-wing extremists or populist right or whatever, now the situation is that thanks to how things have been unfolding in the European Union, the situation is now that we've got those people in mainstream politics. And until a couple of years ago, we only had to speak if we wanted to cut political deals, as the left with, I don't know, with some kind of liberal Democrats or with Christian Democrats or something like this. Right now we have to speak to those neo-traditionalists, and that's much more difficult because the neo-traditionalists, they don't yet have the apparatus. They don't yet have, they are not part of the political elite like the other political currents are. So they are much more energetic. They are much more, their morale, so to say, is higher of their activists. They really seem to have a vision. Okay, this vision is complete. In my opinion, it's a horror. Okay, but many people do like that. Some of them because they don't quite understand what would be the consequences of introduction of some of their postulates, and some do that just because there's no other inspiring message in the public sphere. So they are much more those right-wing populists or the far-right parties in Europe. They are much more energetic and prone to to actually fight for power, really. So for us, for the left, that's very difficult because they have very clear ideas, or most of them have very clear ideas. They are not afraid. They are very courageous. They are prepared to say anything, really anything that is going to spark emotion and debate, even if it's stupid, and even when they know it's stupid. We as the left are unfortunately not prepared to have a proper confrontational discussion with people from those backgrounds. So it's of course not fair to put it all on Angela Merkel, but it is fair to say that she reigned over this piling up crisis that will finally have to we'll finally have to have a solution. And also, let us not forget the devastation of the Greek economy. That's something extremely important because look, I mean, what they did is they basically out of a relatively well-functioning economy, okay, relatively, which used to be the Greek one, they turned it into a third world economy that is completely dependent, and it's basically, it's going downhill, and it doesn't seem that it doesn't look like there's any way that it could be reverted. And basically, Greece is on the same path as Bulgaria has been on for the last, say, 2 decades or so. And in Bulgaria, you can pretty well see where this road is leading to, which is a civilizational disaster. So, I don't really have anything interesting. And look, on the one hand, you've got all those things like the devastation of the Greek economy, okay, and this devastation of Greek economy was done on purpose. It was not done accidentally because they had no other way, and the Greeks have borrowed too much money and stuff like that. Okay, we don't have time to go into the whole thing, but that's they did it on purpose. Now, and
German banks.
German banks and American financial institutions that were securing those credits. Okay, then we have Brexit, then we have the migration crisis, then and you have all those things, and then on the other side, on the other hand, you've got lack of roaming pay, lack of roaming regime when you use your cell phone abroad, like or I don't know what else do you have there. I mean, you don't have to show your passport on certain borders. Okay. Well, I would prefer to show my passports and to pay for calling wherever I have to call when I'm abroad, and to not to have all those things. But this is the nature of the European Union, and this was the nature of the German, and this still is. I mean, Germany is the strongest economy in Europe, and this is the driving force. So obviously, well, I don't like the right-wing conspiracy theories about how Germany is colonized. How Germany is sort of pulling all the strings in Europe, and no one has anything to say because everyone has to be calling Angela Merkel all the time and consult all the decisions with her. I think that only applies to I don't know, people like Boyko Borisov, the former prime minister of Bulgaria, because he really was her puppet, and maybe some other I don't know, one or two prime ministers, but in general, the French ruling class, the British ruling class at the time when they were still in the European Union, or other Western ruling classes like the Italian or the Spanish, they I don't believe that they would just receive orders by phone from Angela Merkel. And of course, they probably in the final aftermath would kind of bend if they had to, in order to, I don't know, carry out some kind of European policy. But I don't think it was that simple as it used to be with between Boyko Borisov and Angela Merkel. So obviously there were tensions and there were deals that had to be cut between all those ruling classes. What is going to happen now with Olaf Scholz? We really don't know. I mean, I don't quite like this. Sort of trying to predict the future when things are totally unpredictable, including the pandemic and the general geopolitical shift that is occurring before our very eyes. What we see from Olaf Scholz and his, for example, foreign minister, I read it today that they warned again, they repeated the Western mantra about how if Russia, invades Ukraine, like, my mouth aches from repeating this. Okay, like how Russia is going to invade Ukraine, then the Nord Stream 2 would probably not work, or I don't know, would never get the certification that it's one of the companies has applied for, and so from what I can see so far, judging by the repetition of the usual mantra, I think that not much is really going to change. Maybe something is going to change domestically, because Olaf Scholz is supposedly a social democrat, so maybe something will change. But I'm not holding my breath. For Europe and for Germany, the problem is that they are only able to project their power basically around here, around where they are, because everywhere else it's difficult for them, despite that I'm sure they'd love to, but it's difficult for them because America is all over the place everywhere else. And they never had the courage, and they never decided, the German ruling class or the European ruling classes together, they kind of never made the agreement to jump out of those short pants that America put them in after 1945, and they're just there. So it was also embarrassing. I can't remember the year, but it was at the break of the century. I think it must have been 2000 and, well, not at the break then, maybe 2005 or 6. Unfortunately, I'm not very bad with chronology. When it turned out that one of the American Secret Service, I don't know whether it was the NSA, CIA, whatever
NSA.
The NSA probably, they actually they listened to all the conversations that Angela Merkel was making through her, private cell phone, and I don't know, probably her chancellor's cell phone. Like she was tapped basically. Okay, like the Americans knew everything, and she wasn't even pushing back against that. All right, she said it's an uncomfortable situation or something like that. I can't even remember the phrase, but it was something, or embarrassing situation or something like this. But nothing followed, right? The only moment when the European authorities tried to confront the American ones was when the scandal broke out about the CIA black sites in Poland and in Romania, and I think in Lithuania. So that was a moment of confrontation. But again, I mean, nothing really happened. Really, nothing happened. I mean, we know pretty much. We know quite a lot about those black sites. For example, in Poland, we know that there was one pretty much. There were some Americans overseeing the tortures, but the torturers were Polish. And we know that the Polish authorities have done that. They didn't even receive anything. Okay, I mean, in the colonial times, you had to bring some gifts. I mean, you had to at least somehow try and bribe the tribal leaders or something like that. Now they don't even do that. We just do it like for the tip, and they did throw a tip of $15 million. That's what the investigation revealed. And, I like to ask the question, who got those $15 million, if anyone had paid tax? But, yeah, again, I mean, we had all those embarrassing moments when the American kind of, the American impunity, if you like, or the American kind of, the American exceptionalism internalized by European leaders was there for everyone to see. Okay, and nothing happened, nothing followed, nothing really changed. And I think that this is increasingly difficult now for the Europeans, particularly for the Germans, because it just doesn't pay off anymore to play the American imperialist card. It just doesn't pay off. I mean, the ongoing conflict with Russia, which is completely, it's completely nonsensical. It's just the basis for it, the assumptions, okay, the kind of reference point, if you want to make any, are they lead back to 2016 and the alleged Russian interference in the American elections, which isn't there and has never been there and wasn't there, and it's like it's a completely made up story. Okay, and you can just go ahead and read, I don't know, Aaron Mate, for example, about it. I mean, he's probably the expert on it. Like, I don't want to elaborate on it here. It's just, and on the basis of that, because the Democratic Party wasn't able to somehow confront its own failure, then they pumped up this story. It became a religion in the United States and a kind of global truth to be believed in without any evidence all over the Western Hemisphere. And now, we had those rounds of sanctions, then we had the coup in Ukraine, then we had all those things. And in the final aftermath, a harsh, and really difficult winter is ahead of us here in Europe, and we're running out of gas. Okay? So like, it's really very, it's a very, I would say, dangerous situation for the German ruling class, particularly for the business elite, because the German business cannot function without the Russian gas. Okay, so Angela Merkel's reign is, for me, one failure after another. I mean, it's like, and the fact that she still is referred to in Germany as like this kind of as a sympathetic person, who tried her best and so on and so forth, which all of those things might be the case. I don't know, but I don't care. I mean, I don't judge things emotionally. I judge things politically. And this is just
you read things like The Economist, or you watch.
No, like a political activist, not like an economist. I just feel that when you want to make political assessments,
like if you read stuff like like the magazine The Economist,
okay, sorry, yeah,
or you watch any commentators on BBC, CNN, and even many people who call themselves left leaning, it's, oh, Angela Merkel. She's to borrow Theresa May's slogan, she represents strong and stable, and she's the embodiment of liberal democracy. She's the embodiment of centrism, and she's a great feminist leader. And when we had that awful Donald Trump, she was the one that rose out of the ashes, and she's actually the leader of the free world. And I have to say this, the fact of the matter, you brought up the migrant crisis. Well, we can't talk about the migrant crisis without talking about the epic crimes of wars of aggression in Libya, Syria, and Afghanistan. And although Angela Merkel, took over, the NATO duties of Gerhard Schroeder of the, of the SPD, I mean, the current migrant crisis that we see, between Poland and Belarus, Afghanis, Syrians, Iraqis, and so forth. Angela Merkel has played she's been a partner in crime to the American empire. Of course, people say, "Hey, she's forced to do it." This is the excuse I hear from everybody now, is that the American empire forces us to do this, and might be some truth to that. But come on, NATO. The fact that none of these people try to hold even referendums on leaving NATO and stuff like that. You're a partner in crime to the American empire. And Libya, Germany played a role in that. Germany and France played a huge, active role in that war for oil and that complete utter clusterfuck, which is the migrant crisis. And she's never held into account for that. And then one final note before I let you respond to all of that is when the German anti-war movement protested against against what was going to be the invasion of Iraq, and Gerhard Schroeder and Jacques Chirac both said, "Yeah, sorry guys, we're not going to get involved in this. This is just." Do you see the people that are protesting? And come on, it's going to be a mess. Angela Merkel, when she was leader of the opposition, supported the war in Iraq, and even wrote an article in the Washington Post to the American audience saying Gerhard Schroeder doesn't speak for all Germans. Lo and behold, she's a partner in crime to the to the war in Libya. German arms companies are giving nothing but arms to Saudi Arabia to destroy Yemen, and then of course supporting the dirty war in the
Yeah, and let's roll back to the early '90s when the criminal role of the West German Christian Democrats was much more explicit. The German involvement in the breakup of Yugoslavia was essential. Germany has also taken part in this bombing, the finishing off of Yugoslavia in 1999. Which, by the way, that was the moment, I think, when the German Greens have turned from being eco-oriented. Well, I don't know whether they were socialist, whether they were ever socialist, but they were at least, oriented towards nature, ecosystems, and stuff like that, green things. But now they just became the war party. They are the major war party in Europe, together with the Polish Law and Justice. So, I'm sure that Angela Merkel. I did not remember when you mentioned it. The article that the editorial, whatever, that she apparently wrote for the Washington Post at the break of the Iraq War, before the Iraq War, encouraging the American ruling class to actually do wage a war. So, and that she will not be in the way for sure. Now, on the question of what I want to say is that I agree with you that she is accomplice. She's complicit. Sorry. That she's complicit, and that the German ruling class is complicit to many crimes in Europe, particularly in Eastern Europe, and and also, this criminal aid to American imperialism in 1999. When they created this Kosovo, which is supposed to be a state. It's not only it's not a state, it's just an American base, basically, and some criminal organizations servicing this state, like, supplying drugs or prostitutes and so on and so forth. So that's what.
Actually, let me interrupt you for a moment, and
Mm.
let me just say that that it was under the SPD, under Gerhard Schroeder, and in the Green Party, a coalition government. They participated in the breakup of Yugoslavia, the bombing of
In the bombing,
Serbia.
yeah, but otherwise it was Helmut Kohl at the beginning of the 90s and the German
Ah,
CDU and
okay.
CSU that actually encouraged the separatist tendencies in Slovenia and Croatia in order to, of course, be able to colonize those states afterwards. So together with Austria, they basically engineered the separation
Okay.
of Slovenia and Croatia,
And
and
she
then
was
the
and
civil.
she was a minister of Helmut Kohl Merkel during
She
that
was a
time.
minister or a vice minister. I can't remember, unfortunately. That would, those of our viewers who are interested in this particular moment, then they will have to Google it up. But yeah. So, like, anyway, she is part of the CDU. She is part of the CDU-CSU coalition, which is the right-wing coalition in Germany, right? And obviously, anyone who's there, then to some extent, being or not being a minister or vice minister or whatever, civil servant of whatever rank, they are complicit to those crimes. And the fact that she doesn't have a record of separating herself or of offering any kind of votum separatum, saying no, I don't support this measure, then obviously it makes her complicit even more. So yeah, like, to me, she's not a positive figure. I understand that many people can just be like kind of they might like the fact that she was a politician that made this appearance, that had this appearance that she's not aggressive, she doesn't lie, she doesn't shout, she doesn't have any record of corruption, for example, in a sense, like, I don't know, her daughter was not the president of Deutsche Bahn, right? Or something like that. So yeah, like, obviously, I mean, there are things that made her likable, but that's why I mentioned this, that you should not look at politics in an emotional manner. You need to have a rational understanding of the process, not just get this impressionist, not base your opinions on some random impressions that, oh, someone made a good impression here, someone made a good impression there. Okay, but over the last 15 years, despite all those good impressions, things are really a mess in the European Union. And it just, even if it's not her fault, okay, she presided over this, so she takes the responsibility, or she should be acknowledging this responsibility. And even if she doesn't, it's still there. I mean, if you're a parent and your kid goes somewhere and breaks someone's, I don't know, car window or something, then you might not be the person guilty directly for that, but you are the responsible person, and you will be held accountable. And the same goes for Angela Merkel. I mean, she might have not produced certain crises, or she might have not instigated certain wounds on the European Union, but hey, you presided over Brexit. Hey, you presided over the migrant crisis. Hey, you presided over the growing tension with Russia. Hey, you presided over the kind of petitioning of Ukraine, which is not in the European Union, but I mean, the European Union did play a huge role in developing this crisis. Hey, you presided over Poland turning into a kind of, authoritarian right-wing regime. Hey, you presided over Bulgaria being totally destroyed civilizationally, culturally, socially, politically, and economically for the last 15 years by a thug that you apparently loved. And so on and so forth. Like, the list is long. So how is Angela Merkel someone who could be the hero of, people who
Claim to be
are,
left.
yeah, like to exactly define themselves as leftists? I don't know. Maybe, but again, it's emotional thinking. It's because she invited all those migrants to settle down in Germany. Yeah, well, okay. And the effect of the whole thing is that in Germany, and not only in Germany, all over the place, really, people, including Bulgaria, Poland, and other places that I know very well, they were very kind of welcoming, I mean, towards the migrants and the refugees and everything. But Angela Merkel and, I don't know, the other decision makers that actually decided to show it to Erdogan, because that's what it was all about, right? I mean, Erdogan was pressing and demanding things, and they finally told him, no, come on, open the door, let them come, we're gonna handle it. Well, it didn't quite work that well, right? And you know, the thing is that they never prepared for it. Like, I don't know, when you think about, for example, Great Britain in the 80s, Margaret Thatcher, she prepared for the miners' strike. Okay, I mean, I don't like the fact that she prepared, the miners finally lost. But what I'm trying to say, I'm using it as an example that for certain crises that could be the result of their own actions, the bureaucrats in the past used to prepare. I mean, Maggie Thatcher, she piled, you know, coal and, you know, everything so that the strikes don't affect the economy to the extent that they would have had she not prepared for this. And then, you know, Angela Merkel, she wouldn't even think about it. Oh, okay, well, we'll manage it somehow, you know, somehow. So it's just not a competent person, and it's not a seasoned politician for me. A seasoned politician is a strategist, and strategy, you know, a word also has a meaning. It's not just a conglomeration of ideas. Strategy means allocation of resources and energy, you know, into concrete and specific projects or ideas or whatever kind of perspectives where you want to, I don't know, have concrete and specific results that you can evaluate after some time. So she was not a seasoned politician. She was not a good strategist. And I really feel that there's
Do you think
nothing
so do you think she gets away for being an awful politician leader because compared to the evil twins of Poland, compared to whatever, you know, douchebag Tory comes out of England, or douchebag Labour that comes out of England, compared to you know, compared to somebody like a Berlusconi, yeah, she looks better, but that's sort of like damning with faint praise. Just like when Canadians keep saying like, "Oh, yeah, things are bad in Canada, but we're not as bad as the U.S." Well, what the hell is that? Like,
Yeah, I mean, this is, but you know, that's also a problem, because I think that this demonstrates that people in Europe have in general responded to the crisis by decreasing their expectations of life, in a sense that, you know, you don't want, like, people, what, we don't demand anything from the politicians anymore. They just have to look good and behave well. Like, is this the whole? Is this what it's all going to be about, right? Whether she's going to get away with all of this, of course she's going to get away. Like, who's going to go after her? What, the Americans are going to hold her accountable? Like, who's going to do this? What would be the purpose? I don't see any incentive anywhere, okay, in order to somehow draw the line on Angela Merkel's legacy and try and hold her accountable. Who's going to do that, and for what purpose? Like, the only force, politically speaking, that could do that and that would have the incentive would be the left. But, you know, the kind of the left that we see right now, doesn't matter whether we're talking about the establishment left or the kind of radical left, I don't think they're particularly interested in that. You know, I mean, I participate in so many initiatives and circles and informal groups and formal organizations in Eastern and Western Europe, you know. And about Angela Merkel, I really feel like I came across maybe 3 or 4 texts produced by leftists that were critical and meaningful, really, about Angela Merkel. Otherwise, no one really cares. It just, you know, it somehow evades the attention of the left and of all those people who could be actively critical against Angela Merkel, because they don't feel any emotional attachment to it. And this is, you know, for them, European Union, for most of the left, the European Union is good. Democracy, liberal democracy, okay. You know, receiving migrants, cool. You know, Brexit, well, that's wrong, but that's not her fault, because it was the extremist right-wingers from Britain that engineered this. So, you know, there's if we don't develop this rational thinking and a kind of political train of thought, then I don't feel anyone will be held accountable, because, you know, you cannot expect Angela Merkel and her friends to you know, to somehow to do the job of their enemies, okay, political enemies. I mean, you cannot expect that from them. So either we do that or no one does. And now she's going to retire and she's going to have a happy a happy life, I'm sure.
She'll work for a nice multi-million-dollar think tank, probably sponsored by the Atlantic Council.
Oh yeah.
She'll be
Yeah.
lavished with praise on Christiana Amanpour, and I'm sure some windbag from the BBC or the Guardian or the Economist or even the Financial Times, and that's that. And two quick follow-ups, two quick brief follow-ups then about Angela Merkel and her replacements. Then is you already said that you don't have high expectations for the SPD and the Greens, and I completely share with you, because if we go back to the 1990s, it was actually the SPD under Gerhard Schroeder and the Green Coalition that actually started the first waves of the kind of third way voodoo economics of of chipping away workers' rights, chipping away the very fragile gains that unions made, and of course being a partner in crime to the Anglo-American empire of NATO. So this new Green SPD coalition, I think it's safe to say we can expect the same, right? And also, you mentioned that even what we deem the far left, in Germany they have Der Linke, which is which is the left party, which is kind of like the German Syriza. Like the Greens, they talk a whole lot about how they're the left alternative to the SPD, but when push comes to shove, they always end up supporting the imperial wars or the austerity packages, and So
well, let's just say that at least that's my opinion. Die Linke is much better than Syriza, in a sense that Syriza has always been just a conglomeration of sects and sectarian leaders incapable of anything. But whereas Die Linke has its root in the old SED, which is the Sozialistische Einheitspartei Deutschland, I think, which is the party of socialist unity of Germany, which used to be the party that ran East Germany. So they do have an apparatus, they do have some kind of tradition, and they do have some competence and some able bureaucrats there. Unfortunately, since the beginning of their existence, I mean, I'm talking since the transition of the SED to Die Linke. Well, it was first called the let me think. I can't quite remember at the moment. I can't recall the former name of Die Linke. Anyway, it was okay. I'm blanking on that. I'm sorry.
No problem.
So anyway, yeah, they a PDS. Okay, so they used to be the PDS, the Party for Democratic Socialism, and now they became quite recently. I mean, a few years ago, they became Die Linke. I feel that they used to be popular in East Germany, just for all kinds of reasons, nostalgic reasons, for also the fact that they did have the courage to suggest some things that were not necessarily very courageous in terms of being political statements that were very radical, but those were definitely political suggestions that would affect the class balance, okay, and that was something that definitely that is something that in every organization, every party, that's something to be appreciated, that someone puts forward this kind of suggestions. But the last elections, they've lost terribly, and I'm not a specialist in German politics, and I don't follow the internal life of the PDS and now Die Linke to the extent that will allow me to formulate any concrete and specific comment on this. I would just say that, basing myself on commentaries that I read from people whose opinions I trust, it seems like Die Linke has fallen into the same trap as all left most left organizations. That is, it's preoccupied with itself, with its internal differences, and is preoccupied with all kinds of scandals that erupt around political differences that are expressed in aggressive manner and then mismanaged in terms of communication and so on and so forth. And of course, that affects the overall message that could have been conveyed through the campaign. No message was really conveyed according to the sources that I mentioned, that I read and that I trust. It was all very vague, and they are just seem to be lacking seriousness. And, if you're trying to be political and if you're lacking in seriousness, then I don't know how far can you go. I mean, you can just count on some people who like jokes to vote for you. But that's not really a very big electorate, particularly not in those sad times that we live in, or difficult times at least. So, yeah, and I would guess that the German left just suffers from the same syndromes and symptoms that that the global, or I don't know, global north
much of the western global, much of the western left.
Yeah.
It's a shame, and that is a perfect segue into this one, which is, you did an article about how you think there is a strong chance Bosnia-Herzegovina, of the former Yugoslavia, which you talked about, is going to break up. And
I don't know whether it's going to break up. That's just a speculation, right? But it could.
Well, give us a historical background, and you already spoke of Germany's overlooked complicit role in the deadly breakup of Yugoslavia. Talk about that.
Right. Well, okay.
And actually, it's funny that she mentioned. It's funny that she mentioned that, because you talked about Kosovo. I'm wearing a shirt of Dua Lipa, who's actually
she's from Kosovo.
Half Kosovo.
Yeah.
So is Rita Ora and BB Rexa. So a lot of these pop techno vocalists come from Kosovo. But anywho.
Yeah, well, they wouldn't make any career there, I suppose, so that's why they had to immigrate somewhere. But look, I mean, there's no way for me to describe the whole history of breaking up of Yugoslavia and so on and so forth right now. The only thing that I can say is, for the sake of of the coherence of this discussion, is that Germany did play the fundamental role in the breakup of Yugoslavia in the beginning of the 90s, and there are two reasons for that. One is like classical German imperialism, which is, the northern Western Balkans have always been the traditional sphere of influence for German imperialism, and in fact, Croatia and Slovenia, to a large extent, are something like a German colony, although of course not in the very classical sense of the word. But same goes for the Czech Republic, for example, right? I mean, and of course, the German imperialism it's a little different than the American one, because when people hear imperialism, they normally associate it with what America does, and they invade, they bomb, and there's just a huge cloud of destitution after they go anywhere. Well, it's not exactly the same with the Germans. There was a lot of death, and there was war in Bosnia, something that actually I think they were not expecting. I think it did get out of control. I don't have any evidence for that. That's just my kind of conclusions about on the basis of everything I've read about this war. So they did not expect that the conflict would grow to such proportions. But also, I mean, the war, bloody as it was, it's being exaggerated. I mean, the war in former Yugoslavia, in Bosnia and Serbia, is constantly presented as a symbol of Eastern European barbarism and stuff like that. Come on. I mean, in this war, in the final aftermath, I don't know, 50,000 people died? Maybe 70,000, something like that. So it's not a war like, I don't know, take Iraq. Man, 1 million people have died, all right? Like directly from bombs, I don't know, 500,000, 200,000 or something like that. But over the period of
more than that,
occupation,
and more than that from the sanctions of mass destruction.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you.
And that was before the invasion.
Yeah, and that's not barbaric, okay? But what is barbaric is those Serbs and those Bosniaks and those Croatians, and of course this was part of the strengthening of the ideological entity or of the ideological construction that was very important for the European Union, because this also is like, they are spreading civilization. They manage solve conflicts. They kind of bring together those barbaric people, in the East who live in the mountains or in the caves or wherever, right? And they bring them and they organize the states for them, and they organize them even to the extent that they aren't really states anymore. I mean, Bosnia and Herzegovina, it's not a state. It's a joke. It's like, I don't understand how anyone who knows anything about Bosnia and Herzegovina will really refer to it. And, people in Bosnia, there is no Bosnian nation. I mean, this is just a completely made up like identity and everything. And of course, the European Union helped creating this false identity and so on and so forth. But look, this is just a protectorate, an EU NATO. This has always been an EU NATO protectorate. The little political entities that function there in this Bosnia and Herzegovina, which is supposedly a federation of two republics, Republika Srpska and the Bosnia Croatian Muslim region there, okay, which is also a federation, by the way. So it's almost a confederation of a small federation, and then in other end, it's a complete mess. Like bureaucratically, when you look at it, I mean, I don't know who really engineered this, but that's just absurd. Okay, I mean, absurd, grotesque on its face. All right. So those political entities that function in those little regional things, regional bodies inside Bosnia and Herzegovina, they have nothing to say. They're just there to run some kind of show. And this is it. The only person with powers, okay, in Bosnia and Herzegovina is the so-called High Representative. And the High Representative is just a bureaucrat appointed from some Western powers. They just, they don't even have a special conference for that. They just, sit somewhere in a hotel lobby, and they go like, okay, so you can be the High Representative now, right? For, I don't know, what the amount of time they would agree on what the official term is, but this is how it happens, okay? And then of course such a person like this High Representative, they have to have a job, right? Like they have to do something, and it's obviously impossible to manage. So in basically the Muslim Croatian kind of federation kind of thing there, it manages, I mean, those little political entities that are there, they try to manage and balance it somehow, just to keep it together. And then there's Republika Srpska, where basically just Serbian, Serbian population. And they also try to manage and to, somehow make sense of whatever happens like every day. But they cannot agree on anything like, there cannot be any coherent policy. I mean, those two parts after those two elements that Bosnia and Herzegovina consists of, they have nothing in common really, except to this High Representative that they cannot even elect. Like this is just kind of, I would say, it's just an artificial entity which pretends to be a state. In the European Union and NATO, they want this to pretend to be a state because it kind of stabilizes the situation for them. But now, and the tendency has been growing for many years now, but new factors are into play that actually accelerate the crisis which has always been there, okay, in Bosnia and Herzegovina. By the way, there are many countries like this in Europe. Like take Ukraine, for example. We're probably going to talk about Ukraine later, but this is the same thing. I mean, it's not a protectorate. It has never been a protectorate in the same sense that Bosnia and Herzegovina used to be. But again, like the same sort of, well, not exactly the same, but similar elements could be seen there, could be observed there. So in the final aftermath, this tension, okay, has to be somehow solved. I mean, something has to happen about it, because the Serbs in Republika Srpska, they want to kind of reassert themselves, because they want things to start happening. They don't want to live in a protectorate. Their political class there, it has some ambitions, and it wants to manifest itself somehow, right? And now with those geopolitical shifts that we observe globally, they naturally turn to Russia for support. And Russia, of course, will use that opportunity and will try to flex its muscle. And
because they both culturally share similar language and similar religion, right?
Not similar language, but obviously Not yeah, Orthodox, yeah, of course, Orthodox Christianity, yes, but that's all over Eastern Europe, with the exception of Czech Republic, Slovakia, Poland, Hungary, right? Otherwise, pretty much everywhere we've got this Christian Orthodox. Orthodox version of Christianity, so to say. But you know, it's just that there are basically since the breakup of the Soviet Union, I would say that only 3 countries have always had this brotherly attitude towards Russia: as Belarus, Serbia, and Bulgaria. As those 3 societies, those 3 countries have always had that. Okay, so of course Bulgaria then entered the EU, and you know all other things, all kinds of other things and political processes happened there. And now it's officially the enemy of Russia, of course, despite the social sentiments being different. In Belarus is a completely different, you know, phenomenon. And then we've got Serbia, which is not in the EU, and despite being under huge pressure from the West, it still, you know, maintains some kind of independence, although it's a big word, but okay, let's just say
I didn't know
independence.
that. And is Serbia resisting joining the EU because of bitterness of what happened with Kosovo
Yeah,
and the color revolution that ousted Slobodan
Milosevic, yes.
Milosevic, right?
Yes, yeah, of course. And like, yeah, how are you gonna expect you know, a nation that you just bombed 10 years ago, 20 years ago to join whatever your structures? I mean, this isn't gonna happen, right? So for me, that's perfectly logical. But what I'm trying to say is that you know, the US or the West and Russia are playing a rather dangerous game in Bosnia and Herzegovina. And I think that it could lead to the split of the country. I think you know, I don't feel that Russians necessarily want to see this entity split right now. They've got a lot on their plate anyway. But I do think that it just could happen by the force of the circumstances, because this guy who's the leader of the, again, I mean, a lot of simplifications in what I'm going to say now, but let's say he's the leader to some extent of the Serbian population there. He does want to have good relations with Russia, and for him it does make sense to assert himself as an independent politician. And for the Serbs, it does make sense to sort of break away from this, because if there was anything ideological about the High Representative and about the existence of Bosnia and Herzegovina, and of course it used to be part of, or it is part of the European kind of ideology, is that you know, the Serbs are guilty for everything. The Serbs are savages. The Serbs are, you know, aggressors. The Serbs are you know, all the worst things that you can imagine. That they have split up, not Germany. They have split up, not Slovenia, not Croatia. They have split up the Yugoslavia. They exercised repression. They killed people, you know, here and there in Srebrenica. Of course, now we're gonna, you know, until the end of our whatever 3 generations ahead, we're gonna be speaking about Srebrenica. Okay, without a context, of course. And then this was really the thing. I mean, the High Representative and all the bureaucrats, regardless of whether they were recommended by NATO or by the European Union or by Germany, Austria, whatever, they only were able to sort of find a meaning for their existence, that is to sort of to pressure the Serbs in Bosnia and Herzegovina to accept that narrative, that they are, you know, they are the scum of the earth, and they should be, they should somehow be, they should accept the superiority of the West over their savageness, you know. And of course, like, no one in their right mind wants to accept something like that. You know, even for myself, it's disgusting who observes these kind of things from, I don't know, 1,000 kilometers in a straight line. Okay, I'm based in Warsaw. So let alone if you live there and if you're subjected to this nonsense and for decades, right? So this is the only thing that I would say they were trying to do effectively. They failed at that, and I think the Serbs in Republika Srpska are fed up with this. And the micro political class in that area, where the Serbian population, which is inhabited by the Serbian population in Bosnia and Herzegovina, has also had enough of this, and now they might wanna actually do something that is going to affect the I don't know, territorial integrity of Bosnia and Herzegovina, if there even is anything like that.
Wow, interesting. And one of these days, we're gonna have to do a show all about Yugoslavia, because that's one of those.
Absolutely, it does deserve. It's like, I just said a few points here, which are very, very general and very, very basic and very simplified, of course.
And very, people say controversial. I prefer to use the term counterversial because, yeah. So we will definitely have to return back to that, and I'm going to post one or two links which gives a counter narrative on the breakup of Yugoslavia. So that said, so this leads to a completely different topic now, which is talk to us about the recent elections in Bulgaria. The GERB Party of Boyko Borisov, unless I'm wrong, is out. Who is the new Grand Coalition replacing him? How do you assess the different parties and their goals? And the great Frank Zappa, in his superb song, said, "The torture never stops." Is that the case for the state of affairs in Bulgaria? And before you answer that, when talking about your ex-president or prime minister Boyko Borisov, can you talk to us again about the story of him and his Turkish counterparts and them losing money in?
That wasn't actually the Turk. I don't know to what extent the Turkish were involved in this, and also, for this particular story, there's actually no evidence, but it's like it's a story that actually makes so much sense and would be so typical of this guy and his acolytes. Allegedly him and his former minister of finances, who, by the way, now lives in the United States, they actually went to invest some 200,000, I think, was it $200,000 or 200,000 euros? I don't know, a large amount of dollars or euros, some kind of hard currency, in some Middle Eastern bank. Okay, and they went there and they got robbed by Hamas. So that's no, sorry, not by Hamas. I'm sorry, by the not by Hamas, but by this Libyan militia. Hezbollah. Yeah, right, exactly. Sorry for the mistake. So, and they were robbed on the way, and in the final, again, there's no evidence for it, but it just sounds so credible, and all the details that emerged, like it was a long time ago, right? So it's an old story, but yeah, it's like.
Oh, it's too good. It's just one of those things that you can't make this shit up.
No. But this is the point. Bulgaria has been run by criminals, okay, for the last 15 years almost, by a gang of criminals, and apparently it was there was this Danish TV series from the 70s, I think, Olsen's Gang, which was a very funny comedy. Like the boss of the gang, Olsen, was never kind of Egon Olsen. He was a kind of he ended up in jail after every episode, okay, because their plans and their concepts were completely messed. They were not even able to properly rob anyone or anything.
Disorganized crime.
Yeah. So it's exactly. I mean, it has its comical aspects. Okay, the Boyko Borisov's reign, like nearly 15 years. But what is not funny is that we, for those 15 years, we managed to conserve this way, this way of development, counter-development, one should say, of stagnancy and of devastation, really. That emerged at the break of the century. I mean, it already began in 1989, but then we had this color revolution in 1996, 1997, and only then things started to really get destroyed totally and to a point of almost no return. So yeah, he kind of conserved it, and he made it like the only way for everyone. And now you're asking me about the new parties. What parties? That's the question. Those are not parties. Okay, those are just clubs that were formed for the purpose of someone being appointed to an important position of power in Bulgaria. Now, party, the word party, again, has a meaning. Party means a part. And why does it mean a part? Because you represent a part of society. This is why it's called a party. And in order to represent a part of society, you gotta have some kind of coherent understanding of why are you there, except for being appointed for some position. I mean, you gotta have a sense of idea and a place and existence in the political reality in Bulgaria or anywhere else, right? And we don't have any parties. GERB was not a party. GERB was a post kind of a retired club, a club of retired Secret Service and police officers. That's what it was. All right. Some of them have found employment in the underground. Okay.
Yeah.
After 1989, and of course they were there, and this was not a party. They did not represent anyone. They didn't represent. They just represent. Some people voted for them. Many voted because they created this kind of network of dependence. Okay, this is like it's very primitive. Say you're a union member or an important union official in one of the Bulgaria's regions. Okay, and you wanna run a small business. I don't know, you wanna open a cafe, for example, or I don't know, you wanna run a stall at the local market. Okay, so once this is discovered by the local authorities, and all of them were controlled by GERB, what happens? They approach you and they tell you, look, you can pay this amount of money for renting out this facility or stall or whatever, or you can pay this amount of money, or maybe you don't even have to pay at all. Just make sure there are no strikes in the region, and this is how it works. And then your business starts to move. You don't have to pay for certain things. I don't know, maybe even some economic shenanigans would be overlooked, right? And then you make sure there are no strikes. There's class peace in the valley, no problem, right? And of course you're going to vote for them. Whom are you going to vote for? Like, you want your business to keep running, right? So this is not, like, some people like to call it a clientelist party. I think it's a very moderate term. I mean, to me, it's just a kind of corporate gangsterism in a primitive, in a kind of primitive format, right? That's what it is. And this is how they created this network of dependencies here and there. So all those people who still depend on them, because they're not out, like they're out of the government, but I mean, the country is still, they can still exercise control to a very large extent. It's not like, you can get rid of such a hybrid between a party and state, okay, just within one round or 3 rounds where we had of elections this year, because we're not able to elect a government, so on and so forth. We're not able to elect a parliament that would be able to form a government. So again, we had GERB, and then the big winner of the elections in April and then in July was a party called, and just by the name of the party you can see, like, you can guess the quality of it. There is such
a as it states.
No, there is such a people. That was the name of the party. Oh. Yeah, so there is such a people. Yeah, okay, and there is such a, like, first of all, what, like, does it tell you anything? Like, what is the party all about? And of course, it was a party which was formed, a club of people who are friends of one of the most important TV personalities in Bulgaria, who has always been on very friendly terms with all the sections of the Bulgarian mob. Okay, and people were thinking, many people that voted for them were thinking that they're actually voting for some kind of major change. That, of course, has never been the case. If anyone has read their program, then you would know that there's nothing even remotely kind of indicating that there would be any departure from the downward spiral that we have been in for the last decades. So of course, it was a complete misunderstanding and a complete mess. And on top of everything, those people, because they were not politicians, they had no idea what political attitude is like. So they had this attitude of a showman. They were a bit like Trump. They were arrogant. They were extremely kind of looking down on everybody. They were shouting. They were like acting, on camera sometimes, and they quite quickly, they were brought down by all the other factors that were in play, because no one wanted to actually discuss with them. And then they got offended that no one wants to discuss with them, because everybody should discuss with them because they are so great and they just won the elections. So everybody should love them. And because it turned out that not everybody loves them, and not everybody loves them to the extent that they are able to, put up with the bullying that they exercise just in order to have, I don't know, a first round of talks about a coalition government or something like that. Let alone that those people, again, I want to stress, they had no idea about politics. No idea. They still don't have any idea. So again, it wasn't a party. It wasn't a party. It was just a club. Okay, that they had to create it quickly in order, to be appointed to power somehow. Then, we had another round of elections, and this was again a club, which, by the way, it's called "We Continue the Change." Again, a completely nonsensical name, something so non-political, and what change do you want to continue? You want to stop the changes in Bulgaria. That's what you should stop the change. That would be, I would say, the proper slogan and the proper name for a movement.
It reminds me of the Green Party of Canada, way before Dmitry Lascaris ran for the leadership race, although he ran for parliament. When the Green Party had this slogan in Canada, it was neither left nor right, but forwards.
Yeah, great slogan. Yeah, exactly. So that means nothing. This. They formed a party, and they kind of, the two guys, one of them is going to now become a prime minister. They are technocrats that were appointed by the president to run to be part of the interim government that had to be in place since April 4th, I think, the first round of elections this year, because we had three, as I mentioned already, and that was because we were not able. I mean, the parliament was not able to come up with a majority and with a government that would be supported by a majority. And look, those people, they based themselves and they formed this club only because the interim government was much more popular, appointed government was much more popular than any other government that was a result of elections. There are reasons for that, of course, which are, I think, not to be neglected. One of the reasons is that they did they did limit the corruption. It's still, Bulgaria is still incredibly corrupt, but they did limit the corruption. Okay, they were not allowing the Bulgarian version of the IRS to overlook certain things just because the people that were doing the kind of whatever crime or fraud were friendly to the prime minister. Okay, this wasn't the case anymore. So quite quickly, by just asking the institutions that they did manage to take control of to do their job, they managed to collect quite a large amount of money. And there were also other scandals where people that are business people, oligarchs that are unfriendly, that are hostile to the former Prime Minister Boyko Borisov, they would come out and they would say a lot of gruesome things about how the Bulgarian state is run, if it is run at all. What is run is the mafia ladder, where people know their hierarchy. And then the Bulgarian state and the institutions, they are just there in order to service this ladder. Okay, that's why Boyko Borisov, as the person at the top of that ladder, had a kind of absolute power through his party and people that are members of that party that were in those state institutions. He was able to do anything. He just snaps at the top, and the whole structure of state institutions and oligarchic groups and stuff, they do things, okay, for him or for his friends or whatever he comes up with or approves, right? So and now, of course, this interim government would be a little more how to say this, a little friendlier, okay? Yeah, not friendlier, but people would be friendlier to the government and would be more kind of the government would be more likable. But the problem here is that, unfortunately, this is how the Bulgarians make their choices, politically speaking. or have been making their choices over the last 30 years. First they had a relatively well-functioning, I know it's difficult to imagine today, but before 1989, Bulgaria was a very well-developed state and society. We were approaching 10 million in terms of population. Now we're 6. We had industry, we had agriculture that was one of the top in the world. Okay, we were competing with the Soviet Union and the US. Okay, we had industry and science on top of everything. We had science. We had our own brand of computers. We had all kinds of things. We were a properly developing country of, let's call it, the second world. Now we have fallen into the third world, and you can see that by all indicators. If you take the Gini index or whatever else you want to look at, everything is a total mess. So back then the Bulgarians had this. Then suddenly, the so-called transition came. We had some very, very harsh moments in the 90s. Then, when people thought that things are going to be better after the color, well, at the time people were not aware of the fact that it was a colored revolution, right? But people were thinking that after those mass protests, 1996, 1997, things are going to be going better. But apparently they went even worse. And, with this kind of, after so many years of destitution and demoralization, what do you really expect? I mean, people just want someone so that they could grab their I don't know, their leg or their hand or whatever, and they could be led somewhere where it's just a little better. And unfortunately, this also strikes back, because this is not a political choice. I mean, this is just a random choice based on your emotional disbalance and based on your fatigue. Okay, because you're fatigued because of the reality, because of everything of your experience. Okay, everyday experience.
Yeah.
And you want to go somewhere, but if you just write the carte blanche for any person that goes out there and says, I'm going to be your savior, then you will always end up kicked in your, So this is how things are. And now we voted again. First we voted for this, There Is Such a Nation party and the TV personality I told you about. Now we voted for these two guys that formed this club that they claim is a party called We Continue the Change. And, my bet is that they will try to make some cosmetic changes that will affect the overall decorum, and they will try to make the impression that now we have a really good government, like that really is appreciated by the West, and and that doesn't run the kind of mafia whatever business, okay, and the state is just a kind of added to that. So they will try to make that impression, but I don't think that they will get very far with this, because judging by what I've seen, in the Bulgarian media so far, it seems like they are going to continue all the neoliberal policies. That is, they will keep Bulgaria this neoliberal dystopia. And considering that this isn't going to change, then we can pretty safely say that things are just going to be getting worse. Although there might be some shift in the aesthetics, I suppose. And that's pretty much it. So again, I'm not holding my breath. I'd love to see some changes.
Wow.
But
and how did one final one follow-up question to that is, how did the Anti-Mafia party fare?
Oh yeah, they didn't enter the parliament. It's like, I mean, all of those parties, they brand themselves as anti-mafia, anti-corruption, and so on and so forth, which is just a mantra in Bulgaria. Like, the West likes to say, oh, Bulgaria has problems because of corruption. Well, yeah, we have problems because of corruption. But there are other elements involved as well, because before 1989, I believe there was also corruption, or wasn't there? Because I think there must have been some corruption at least, right? And now we've got more corruption, that's for sure. But there's got to be a reason for that, because
and some of that corruption is perfectly legal because of Western.
No, but let alone the legal corruption. I'm talking about the illegal corruption. But wait, who was facilitating this corruption? Boyko Borisov was facilitating this. He was the top guy, right? Who supported Boyko Borisov for all those years? Angela Merkel, So, like, how are you going to actually criticize Bulgaria for being corrupt when you were overseeing the corruption? In fact, like you were making sure that it's there. So, you know, it's
It's like
it's
yeah,
rather
yeah.
absurd.
Yeah, it's like
Yeah,
it's like the people who describe Middle Easterners. You know, you were talking about how the Serbs of Bosnia Herzegovina are taught to self-hate themselves and to take full responsibility for the breakup of Yugoslavia, even though Germany was a part of that, America was a part of the divide and conquer. And it's like in the Middle East, you know, everyone talks a whole lot of crap about how poor Afghanistan, it's in the grips of the Taliban, and it's like, guys, the Taliban didn't just fall from the sky.
yeah,
You know
exactly. I mean,
who's
who created the Taliban?
like who exported them and Bin Laden and so forth? It was you guys, the civilized West and
Yeah,
so
yeah,
forth.
yeah,
And
yeah, yeah, yeah,
it's
yeah, yeah.
unbelievable.
Totally, totally. I know. It's just it's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah,
But look, this is so the situation in Bulgaria isn't going to change, and it isn't going to change. Why? Because Bulgaria, in order for things to change, you need a political entity that will affect the overall balance, okay, the class balance, if you like. But even if you don't want to look at it in class terms, like I don't want to necessarily get ideological about it, it's just like you need a party that is going to challenge the structure. And none of the parties there, or none of the political entities that claim to be parties, want to do that. And then, there's the question, and I think this question is valid for the whole region of Eastern Europe, whether the liberal democratic order makes any sense for us. It really is a very important question, and it's not asked by the left, or not asked enough, at least.
yeah,
And my answer is that I'm not sure. Like, I don't really have a very strong position on that yet, but it doesn't seem to be working because Western Europe is a unique place. Okay, and it has always been a very unique place for many reasons. Historically speaking, it was pretty much never conquered by anyone. Like, you had some Arabs here and there, right, or Turkish here and there, but that was like, and then what? The Great Britain was invaded only once, right? I mean, in what, 1066 or something like that, right? Like we're talking about. I mean, we're talking about ancient history almost, right?
they're the ones that does the invading. We don't get invaded.
Yeah, yeah. No, but what I'm trying to say is that this region, which was never really conquered by anyone, okay, it developed a very peculiar train of development, a very peculiar, train of social and historical and political development, and it was by far the only region in the world that in the Middle Ages, okay, and a little later, had a segment of society which was free, like, the nobility and stuff like that, okay? So, I mean, this never happened anywhere else in the world, really, all right? I mean, not to this extent, at least. So, then, the product of such a civilizational development to just kind of, to project it onto every other, it just doesn't work. Like, when you look at the society like Bulgaria, there is no dispute like in the West between liberals, conservatives, or social democrats. We don't have, like, a liberal in Bulgaria doesn't mean anything, or a conservative. It's just like when you ask someone, are you conservative or liberal? They will just nod their head and go like, what? Like, how they wouldn't know like which of those two identities to embrace, because it just doesn't mean anything in the Bulgarian culture and for the Bulgarian society. Okay, socialist, that yes, because we had socialism, state control, socialism and stuff. So yeah, that's something. And then socialist and anti-communist, that's a kind of idea that people in Bulgaria could relate to. All right, that's something. But otherwise, it's this is just not the way things work in our societies, and I really feel that electoralism in its with its Western kind of the Western concept of
Yeah.
it is just not something that can guarantee progress, political progress. Although I think that if we had a strong a strong leftist party, or if the Bulgarian Socialist Party, which is the only party really, because it does have an electorate, it does have a very solid sense of place, and a very solid place also in the history of Bulgarian politics. If it had actually represented those people that it claims it wants to represent, that even within this electoral Western liberal democratic system, they would have never gotten out of power, really, if they had done, because the Bulgarian society has been crying for some kind of leftist solutions over the last 30 years, and no one offered them anything like that. So I think it all boils down everywhere, really, not only in Bulgaria, to lack of coherent left alternatives, and that's
Interesting.
you know.
Well, yeah, exactly. And that's a perfect segue into, explain to an audience, particularly a Western audience that leans to the left, that supports people like the Squad or Jeremy Corbyn, Bernie Sanders, or even Tulsi Gabbard, why even if you vanquished all of the center to far right parties and in Bulgaria and Eastern Europe, why liberalism and even center-left parties that model themselves after the SPD or the Nordic ones isn't enough to fix the deep problems of inequality and the plight of the majority, working poor and unemployed, and the lost youth of the region. Why is the liberal democracy model, which guarantees the free markets, is a threat and simply doesn't work for Eastern Europe?
Well, I think that it mostly doesn't quite work for Eastern Europe because there is no connection between that mechanism that is in place and the kind of social sentiment, because we did not go through the same path, okay, historically speaking, like the Western countries did, like where they had this, moments of developing capitalism, going into capitalism, then, understanding that electoral democracy makes sense for capitalism to exist and stuff like that. And, I feel that in the West, democracy is a concept that is generally valued. I mean, people, when they want to have democracy, they feel it's something good, they understand it, or even if their understanding is superficial, they kind of perceive it as some kind of security mechanism that secures their impact on whatever's going on around them. Even if they think that the current democracy is superficial, that it's fake, and so on and so forth, they kind of, there is social sentiment, at least, that kind of services this. They want to go and vote. They want to, they want to identify themselves, some of them, of course, with a given party or, I don't know, a political current, and so on and so forth. Whether in the East, in Eastern Europe, democracy is basically associated with the changes of the last, 3 decades. That means people associated with the restoration of capitalism, and they associated with being bombarded with democracy, human rights, civic liberties. At the same time, everything was falling apart around them. So for them, this is it. They just carry in their heads this dissonance between everything falling apart, but at the same time, they had to be convinced that things are going better. So for them, democracy is really a traumatic experience, or is something that is linked to, is associated in the collective minds of the people with something that is wrong, that is profoundly, destructive, and they don't like it.
It's a dirty word, like in Russia, because when people think of democracy in Russia, they think of the terrible Yeltsin years, and they may not like,
exactly,
and they may not like Putin. But going back to what you were saying about about Bulgaria, the expectations were lowered, so people just, can we just have somebody that just gives us enough of a wage that, that the electricity doesn't, go off, and that's
yeah, we're exactly there. I mean, it's a very difficult situation, really, for everyone, okay, except for those who want to continue their exploitation, because for them it's fantastic. The society has basically been effectively silenced. No one does anything. Even if someone does something like the protest from the last year in Bulgaria, which lasted for nearly 6 months, okay, every day, almost every day on the streets, people were there. So what? Like if the European media, or I don't know, the Western media, or in general the media, they don't take it up to the extent that that they make it, like, I don't know, part of the debate, the public debate, then nothing changes. And then, I mean, okay, we've been out on the street for 6 months and we got this, like, we got like the TV guy I told you about, like that was the leader, that is the leader of this party.
Who you say
There
is
is
worse than
such a nation.
Zelensky, right?
Was that?
That who you said is even worse than Zelensky, because Zelensky was a
Yeah, I
better
think he's
actor.
worse. Yeah, I think he's worse. But what I'm trying to say is that every time we're looking for an alternative, we get something like this. So this is a combination of wrong political mechanism being in place, and of course, this is also a problem of the kind of, after decades of destitution, you will obviously develop some kind of demoralization in the society and cynicism and all those things. So, you really need a process. You really need a lot of inspiration and mobilization. And that's only the left can secure this in order to lift people out of this apathy. Okay, I mean, you really gotta be able to mobilize people, and for that you need revolutionary sentiment, and you need coherent left politics. So as long as we don't have that, I don't feel that anything could potentially change, unless, I don't know, something super unexpected happens.
And do you think that the left in Bulgaria and Eastern Europe need to stop looking to Western European left parties like the Nordic ones, or like the SPD and that
Yeah, I
they
said that many times. Right. Yeah, I said that many times, and I'll just repeat it briefly. I don't think there's any model for us. Okay, we just got to figure it out on our own, and I think we would be able to figure it out on our own. But there's got to be, if you want to act politically, then you gotta be serious about it. In a sense, what do you want to do? Like, why are we forming this, I don't know, this paper, or why are we forming this organization? Why are we joining this party? There's got to be some idea behind it. And when the idea is that I'm kind of on the left and I'd like to do some left things, and maybe I can get a grant from here or a grant from there for that, then it's okay. Then you're going to run this show, and that's fine, but you're not going to get anywhere beyond this. Like, you need a kind of an idea, a political idea, and a political idea means that you want power, you want to fight for power, and you want to look for ways and strategies and ideas that will enable you to get to power. Because in order to change things, and that's unpopular as it might sound, in order to change things, you need power and money. That's what you need. And in order to be able to get that, you got to at least want this. And the left in Eastern Europe, in my view, is not particularly interested in that. It's rather interested in running their own little shows, and I'm not. It doesn't make me very optimistic.
So you think that it's more about the more about the celebrity than the actual revolutionary change, which is
I
the
don't
problem
think.
which is the problem of which is the problem of I find of the NDP in Canada, or the fraud squad of of the United States, in which
No, but
yes,
when you mention the squad, I think it's like, they're even worse, because they could challenge sometime, at least, for the sake of I don't know, clarifying their identity, and to demonstrate to their base that they actually want to be independent, that they're trying, but they're not let to do things. Okay, but they're not going to do that because I don't want to go into why. Okay, I've got my ideas and about it. Like, I'm not really a specialist in American politics and stuff like that, so I don't feel I'm competent enough maybe to comment on it. But take the Polish left, for example, which is in the parliament. Like, what are they had a campaign boasting about how they have been in the parliament for 2 years now. Okay, you've been there, and what? Like, that's a question. They've achieved nothing, literally nothing. And and then they would explain, if someone asks that question, they would say, yeah, but we don't have the majority. Well, yeah, but to gain the majority, guys, you got to actually do something to convince people to vote for you. I mean, you can't just say, well, we're only going to act and you're allowed to hold us accountable when we have the majority, or maybe a constitutional majority. Only then you can act. This is not political. This is infantile. This is just an overall misunderstanding of everything, which politics consists of, in my opinion.
Interesting, and but safe to say that liberal democracies just don't work in Eastern Europe.
I don't think they work. At least there's
because of the fact that the free market is guaranteed, and if you can't really.
No, not because of that exactly. I would say that it's mostly because of something else. It's mostly because of the elections. The elections are always won. I mean, it's just that no matter who wins, the elections are won. Like, I mean, nothing changes, to the extent, and for us, it's particularly visible. I know that it's a mantra for the West, like, the Westerners like to joke about it and stuff. But here, hey guys, you had your ups and downs, okay, over the last, 100 years of electoral democracy. We had this type of electoral democracy only for the last 3 decades in some of the countries before the Second World War, and only for a while, by the way, because most of them turned into dictatorships, and it brought nothing but plight and destitution. Do you get that? So, how are you going to explain to those society, oh, but let's vote, and then, and let's human rights everything, and let's civic liberties everything. This just doesn't work. And the only way it worked in places like Russia, for example, although people like to say that Russia is not democratic, I don't quite understand why Russia is not democratic, considering that the authorities, Russian authorities, have huge support and have been elected with elections no one disputed. All right, so what's the point? What's the non-democratic element? The thing is that their democracy is rather illiberal, in a sense that they don't incorporate all these liberal values. They don't, do this ritualistic talk about civic liberties, democracy, human rights, and stuff like that, because the Russian authorities, they understood that it doesn't make any sense to make that appeal, because no one cares about this appeal. So they make another appeal. They make appeal of, that there's someone who's going to take care of you. There's the father of the nation, that there's and there is development. Okay. I mean, whatever you want to say about Russia and its authorities, Russia now and Russia 20 years ago are two different zip codes, if you like. It's like different reality in many aspects, in most aspects, really, maybe even in all. So it's just people democratically support an authoritarian government. Okay, and this is something, and this authoritarian government is doing a lot to reassert itself, or reassert Russia and assert itself as a government, as an important political entity in global politics. And this is something that the West hates. But because the West only has this idea, democracy, democracy, human rights, they cannot challenge him and say that, oh, but you're working against the will of your people, or you're working against the well-being of your people. They can't say that, because they have been working against the well-being of their own people. So for them, it's nothing to argue about. They can only use this democracy and human rights thing to do the Russia bashing. And I would say that this is quite ironic, because Russia is probably one of the very few places where the outcome of the elections, the outcome of implementing liberal democratic mechanisms was such that it did guarantee a level of steady development and a level of stabilization that goes a little bit beyond what you referred to earlier in regards to Bulgaria, where you said that, oh, give us at least some food and we're gonna, right? Or electricity. You said electricity. The electricity doesn't run. That there are no blackouts and stuff. So yeah, and that's like, either way, either it doesn't work, or if it works, it produces something like this that you can observe in Russia. So I would say it doesn't quite work. That's why I would argue for, but that's a whole different show, and we can speak about it maybe next time. I would argue for revolutionary socialist democracy, and not necessarily that it has to be called this way. I'm just speaking from the point of view of the doctrine that I'd like to apply. And I would see an extension of democracy in many aspects, but I would also see disciplining certain. I would also see disciplinary measures, especially in terms of the management of the statehood, so to say. Those two things combined, and again, like there's no guarantee that anything will work, but what we have in place right now is obviously not anything that works. Like, if you are a liberal Democrat, I will just give you one argument that should be convincing, and if it's not convincing, then you're probably not a liberal Democrat, because liberal democracy makes sense only under one condition. That is, it's representative, like it represents something. If there is no representation component, a strong representation component, then it's a failure. And when you look at the Polish government, the current Polish government, despite the fact that it has the majority in the parliament, it represents the will of about 10% of the electorate. For me, that means liberal democracy doesn't work, and electoralism doesn't work.
Exactly. And then my my second to last question, and that's a perfect segue to the ongoing coronavirus crisis. How is Bulgaria and Poland faring? And putting aside all the conspiracy theories about the origin and the bizarre narrative, some insist that this is a scandemic or pandemic, or COVID is just like the flu, and just accept that this is a highly dangerous pandemic that we need to follow the science to beat. What do you and like-minded Marxist advocates should have been the response to the pandemic? And what do you and like-minded colleagues continue to advocate to vanquish the pandemic? Because I know many people have become anti-vax fundamentalists. If there is truth that the vax isn't safe enough, wasn't regulated properly before coming to the market by big pharma and various conflicts, then don't we need to do strict lockdowns in order for this?
I want to say that I have no medical knowledge. Okay, so I can only judge certain things politically, and I would say the following. Now, I am politically happy that despite the fact that we have global capitalism and things rotting, we at least were able to get the vaccines. I'm personally happy about that. I don't want to. I'm not competent enough to judge whether they are safe enough or whatever. I don't know about all these procedures. I did not want to go through all the hardships of being infected with coronavirus, so I took the vaccine, and I encourage everyone to take vaccines. Yeah. So that's it. Now, in terms of the reception of the whole thing. Now, look, of course, and I can see that in American and Anglo-Saxon media, how this Eastern Europe bashing, because, the Eastern Europeans, stupid savages, and of course, they don't use those words, but that's the message they convey, those articles. Basically, they don't want to, Guys, it's all your fault, because you turned Eastern Europe into this nonsense that it is right now, okay? You made our governments after 1989 devastate the healthcare system, and now suddenly you expect people to trust all the state institutions after years of devastation. Okay, and no one cared about people's lives and their health and everything. No one cared. Okay, now suddenly everyone cares, and people are expected to trust everyone. Of course they won't. And Maria Chernat said it in one of the programs, my co-host of On the Barricade. She said that today the level of demoralization in Romania, and that's in other countries in Eastern Europe as well, is so bad that even if you had the best tested miracle pill for COVID that would just erase the disease immediately, okay, if everyone had taken it from the country or whatever, people would still be hesitant to take it, just because of the pathology that was generated by the transition to capitalism. And otherwise, what can I say? I mean, of course, we're doing really bad, and there are conspiracy theories. There are all kinds of other stuff, I will just say that if this happened in the 80s, and if we had still those governments that we had then in place, everybody in Eastern Europe would have been vaccinated a long time ago, and there would be no discussion about it. And the pandemic, well, it would not be probably over, but nothing even remotely close to this disaster we're living in right now.
What would you and your and like-minded colleagues and comrades advocate should have been the response to coronavirus?
My response has always been that well, of course, we should have emergency state in place. That is, provided, I mean, the Constitution allows that in situation of disease and stuff like that. Of course, this was not put in place because it's then you have to have, you have to compensate people for that. So the authorities didn't want to compensate people for that. So they introduced all kinds of lockdowns and repressive measures, but illegally, against the Constitution, and of course that provoked reaction, of course, on the part of the society, and of course this reaction strengthened only what later became this anti-vaxxer phenomenon that we've never had, by the way, in Poland or anywhere in Eastern Europe before, because before 1989 we were rational societies, repressed by it, but rational, and well educated, and so on and so forth. So I would say that, yeah, probably that politically speaking, that would make sense. And then all the lockdowns or whatever other measures, they would have been legal and people would be properly compensated for that. I would definitely support this. But I would support also mandatory vaccination. This is something that I know it's controversial today, and I know that it goes against the liberal mantra.
Boyan, you really are a Stalinist. They say that wearing a hospital mask is like Hitler or Stalin pointing a gun to my head. So you are a Stalinist.
Yeah. Sure, I am a Stalinist because I want people to prosper.
Sponsored by Bill Gates and Dr. Fauci.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. And this is like, look, I mean, I don't want to even go down this road of deconstructing this nonsense because we could spend another 2 hours here, and I think I would have to bring something stronger to drink than just tea, in order for us to get into that.
And I know I've pissed off some friends and even people I admire with that snarky little joke of mine.
Right. Yeah, but now, the mandatory vaccination, in my opinion, is not something that would necessarily be very controversial in Eastern Europe. In Western Europe, maybe it would, but in Eastern Europe, it wouldn't be because, there is a tradition of mandatory vaccination. So that would be some. Of course, I mean, you would get some far-right nonsense, I don't know, some football hooligans or something that would come out and protest, and there would be probably clashes with the police, but that would be over in 48 hours. And the majority of the population would just go and take the jab, and that's my prediction, of course. It's a speculation. I don't have any evidence or research that exactly that's the way things would unfold, but that's how I'd guess.
So not for the whole my body, my choice. You don't think that we can beat the vaccine with just some people vaccinated and other people not vaccinated?
No, but it's not only a question of that. I mean, on the one hand, I just feel that if the state makes any sense, then it should take the responsibility for the massive health of the people, all right? So the collective health of the people. So the state should do something about it. Otherwise, really, I want the state to exist only if it's useful. If it's useless, then it can go away. I don't need a state that doesn't help or that doesn't. Yeah.
But with that, we have the libertarian hellhole, which is Eastern Europe, and dare I say Western Europe, and dare I say any one who fell under the guru of Milton Friedman and Hayek.
Right. Well, we never had any libertarians, and we don't have such a political tradition. So this is all imported from the West. I mean, the ideas and the concepts and stuff like that. And as we spoke earlier, or maybe I did not. If you want to copy things from the West, then you will only be successful if the West supports you in this. Like if they give money, if they set up their own organizations, or if they help you set up organizations, if they manage your government, if they, that kind of stuff. But if you want to copy the Western, models for the left, which no one supports because it's just too dangerous for the establishment, then you're not going to get anywhere. That's why we have to have our own coherent response to what is going on. And I feel that mandatory vaccination would be, but of course I wouldn't run on mandatory vaccination just like that. I would just say that I want to we want to take care of the security of the people, of the nation, and so on and so forth. Same with abortions, for example. I mean, I don't know. There are circles in Poland who run on the slogan "abortion is good" or "abortion is okay." I don't know. Maybe abortion is okay for me, no problem. But that's not a slogan I would run on. I would explain to people that it's the safety of our mothers, it's the safety of our daughters, it's the safety of our sisters. You know, that's what it's all about. So, the idea itself is not enough. You got to have some kind of idea about the political communication that you're going to put forward. And unfortunately, that means you're going to clash with all kinds of backward and sometimes conservative ideas that are embedded in every society, not only in Eastern European societies. And, here we come again to the point where the left does not have the courage to actually,
I'm going to ask, yeah.
to actually do that because, it's just... for the end of the program, because I got to really go in about 12 minutes, I just want to say this. Nothing is going to be ever solved if the left continues to perceive their role in the society as those who want to create safe space for all kinds of, people, repressed, minorities, and stuff like that. There is no safe space. Life is not a safe space. Things in the world, and regardless of whether it's capitalism, socialism, you will experience pain and discomfort because this is just how things are. And I don't want to go into the philosophy of it. And we want to make life more bearable and most of all, more sensible. I mean, people have to have a meaning of life, and people have to be offered a meaning of life. And the meaning of life for most people is not to stay home, not work, smoke pot, and go to a Tinder date, every second date. This is not a meaningful life. This is what Slavoj Žižek calls a stupid, happy life, and it normally ends in depression after you turn 35. So, most people have to have a meaning, have to have, want to contribute to the society. They want to have, satisfaction. They want to have, all kinds of things that will make their life sensible and meaningful in their own eyes and in the eyes of others. And if we don't decide to depart from this hedonistic, completely nonsensical, anti-socialist and anti-humanitarian concept that is an aberration even of what was developed in the late 60s, the so-called New Left, I would say then we're not really going to get anywhere with anything.
Before I let you go, very quick round of questionnaires, and in memory of James Lipton, who is my hero, who did this questionnaire for Marcel Proust and Bernard Pivot. Let's do this quick questionnaire before Boyan has to go, which is, Boyan, what is your favorite word?
In which language?
Any.
Well, the only favorite words that I thought of, and that's for aesthetical reason, are two Bulgarian words. One is draskutina, and the other one is sirech. Draskutina means a scratch, and sirech means something like that is.
What is your least favorite word?
I don't like swear words in most languages, but it's again because of the aesthetics of them. I feel they are just uncomfortable for me to pronounce, with some exceptions, of course. But yeah.
Okay. What turns you on creatively, spiritually, or emotionally?
When I take a good nap.
What turns you off?
When the meal is not tasty.
What is your favorite? Well, you don't like curse words, but if you had to pick one, what is your favorite curse word?
That's a difficult question. I would say I cannot say what is my favorite. I can say what is the one that I'm most used to, which is the English F word. I use it more often than any other swear word.
What sound or noise do you love?
What's that?
What sound or noise do you love?
Oh, I love the clock ticking. I love, the buzz of my refrigerator. And I like music. I like a lot of music.
And what sound or noise do you hate?
I hate the sound of of a noisy street. I used to live on a noisy street, and that's like, you know, the trams in 5 in the morning. That's not something I enjoy.
What if you were what profession other than yours would you like to attempt? So if you weren't doing journalism, what would you like?
I'd like to be a plane pilot or a train engineer.
Interesting. And what profession would you not like to do under any circumstances?
Police.
Good one. And if heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say as you arrive at the pearly gates?
Don't worry, socialism is around the corner.
I'm gonna assume if you were a Christian, everyone knows Jesus was a socialist.
Right. Yeah.
So
yeah. By the way, there's a good book that was written by an American Marxist that just came out like a month ago or a couple of Jesus Christ. Oh, Jesus was a socialist.
I'm gonna have to check that book out. I'm sure the liberation theologians would definitely appreciate that. So we were joined on this edition of 1+1 with our returning champion, Boyan Stanislavski.
Thank you.
The co-founder and editor-in-chief of the Barricade, which is a pan-Eastern European news outlet with a critical left perspective. Boyan, Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. And I know it's Hanukkah season still for some of our Jewish friends and maybe Jewish viewers. So happy Hanukkah to those people. And Boyan, thank you so much for joining me. I look forward to coming back on your program again in the future.
Absolutely.
And we always enjoy having you back here. So until then, all I can say is power to the people, death to the fascist pigs. And let's hope that, we get through this ongoing coronavirus crisis. So
right. Stay healthy and keep fighting. Thank you. Ciao.